It's not a good ring today, is it? It's the humidity must be strong. All right. One of the things we're going to come to order here in about a second. We're going to hopefully get into chapter 8. I know. I think maybe 2 weeks ago we passed out some chapter 8 slides. I have some more, and I'll just send them around. That if somebody wants to, if they need them, just to grab them. Kathy is making some slides for chapter 7. We're almost finished with chapter 7, and we should finish that hopefully here in the first 15, 20 minutes. There's anybody, in a moment I'm going to have about 20. Does anybody need chapter 7 slides? Okay, so we have some, they'll be coming. And then I'm going to pass around the refreshment list. For next week, we've had some conflicts come up with some. And if you can do next week, if you would, sign up.
I'll do it next week.
Okay.
She wanted me to take us off of the 30th.
Okay. That might be something to do. Let's do this. Okay. What's available on the refreshment list is Ann and Minnie will take care of next week, but they were down to do, what was that next one? They were down to do September 30th, so now September 30th is available. And so if you can sign up and do September 30th, just go ahead and put your name in that. All right, here's chapter 7. Raise your hands again. All right. Yeah, just one page to 8. All right, 7. All right, so let's, there's 7. 1, 2, 3, all right, 4 for 7s. Okay. Well, just send it around. Somebody will be gracious enough to sign up. If not, we can always assign, right? Isn't that how we normally do it? Where you get a chance to volunteer, and then if you don't volunteer, you get what voluntold, and so that might be the way to do it. All right, and I'm going to send the prayer chart around this, or the prayer pad around this way. And if there's any prayer requests, if you would, please put that down. And if we don't have your email, which means that if you have not received an email from Kathy, probably in the last 2.5, 3 weeks, I don't think we've sent out one last week. But if you didn't get one, announcing that Bible study was going to resume and things of that nature, please, on your way out today, stop by Kathy Holland's desk, which is at by the main entrance, and give her your email so that we can add you to the list. Okay. I think that's everything. I think we're good to go. All right, so just kind of as a recap, where's my thing? We started back a couple of weeks ago on chapter 6, and just to recap for the church in Corinth as a whole, it's a very real church, and what we mean by real is that it's a church just like us. I mean, it's filled with all kind of some good things, some wonderful things, some strong leadership. At the same time, there's some dysfunction in the church, and particularly around the issues of around leadership and the arrogance that certain leaders have. Some of it has to do with what they call a special knowledge, which I know we don't do this in the church, but people, I've been a Christian longer than you, which means I know more than you, and so with me, because I know more than you, then I can, I got special privileges, things of that nature. But it was going on back then. The city or the culture of Corinth was a very hedonistic type culture and society, and so naturally that started to filter its way inside the church. And so at some point there were representatives from from the Corinth church that asked Paul for some help. And Paul wrote to them a first letter that we don't have. It's lost to history. And then there was correspondence back from them, maybe some months or a year later. Paul writes again his second letter, which is what we have for 1 Corinthians. And then, of course, there's another correspondence that shows up down the road, which is what we have for 2 Corinthians. And the way the book sort of breaks down and lays out for us is that, they wrote with about 7 or 8 different issues, and Paul tackles one for a chapter or 2 and maybe 3 or 4, and then he moves on to the next topic and on down the line. And so it's not set together or put together around a theological theme, like say maybe the Gospels would be, or maybe some of the other books of the Bible. This really is just one topic right after the other. And what holds them together, I mean, there are some connecting theological concepts that can show up in some of the chapters. But what really holds the book together is that what's common among it all is that this is to a church that has some real struggles. And so we started back in our fall a few weeks ago on chapter 6, and there was issues around lawsuits. Now what we mean there is petty lawsuits. And instead of trying to work it out amongst themselves, they would, somebody cut you off in line to lunch and immediately you take them to court. And I mean, it's something similar to that. And the way the whole court system was set up in the Greek world is, on one level, it was legal, as in they took care of some legal and some civil matters. But at the same time, it was sort of a cheap entertainment. And so people would come down and they would, let everybody air their laundry out in front of others. And, it's kind of like, it's like our society. I mean, just pick up a magazine and there it is, So, but then that's about the first part of chapter 6. The second part of chapter 6, you start to get into a new topic that Paul is going to address, that he did address at the second half of chapter 6, all of chapter 7, and into chapter 8. And what holds those chapters together is the idea of what do you do with your body, and how is stuff that's physical link up, or how it's connected to stuff that's spiritual, or maybe physical to metaphysical, things of that nature. And so last week we looked at chapter 7, where we started to look at this concept of how is physical and spiritual held together. In the Judeo-Christian understanding of body and spirit is that it's all part of the same being. It's not something that's separate as it was in a Greek world. Body, things in the Greek world that consist of matter, is considered evil. And that's not true inside of the church or inside of a Judeo-Christian understanding of the body. That the body is something that was created by God. It's good. It's redeemable. And so what you do with your body makes a difference. And so that's kind of where we're at. And we're going to continue in chapter 7. And we're if someone would pick up with verse 25 and let's read. Does anybody feel very ambitious? Would someone be willing to read 25 through 40? It's only 15 verses. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought they said, okay, I'm ready. All right. Yeah, you have been voluntold. So.
Now concerning virgins, I have no command of the Lord, but I give my opinion as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. I think that in view of the impending crisis, it is well for you to remain as you are. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be free. Are you free from a wife? Do not seek a wife. If you marry, do not sin. And if a virgin marries, she does not sin. Excuse me, if you marry, you do not sin. If a virgin marries, she does not sin. Yet those who marry will experience distress in this life. I would spare you that. I mean, brothers and sisters, the appointed time has grown short. From now on, let even those who have wives be as though they had none, and those who mourn as though they were not mourning, and those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing, and those who buy as though they had no possessions, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. For the present form of this world is passing away. I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about the affairs of the Lord, how to please the Lord. But the married man is anxious about the affairs of the world, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried woman and the virgin are anxious about the affairs of the Lord, so that they may be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about the affairs of the world, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to put any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and unhindered devotion to the Lord. If anyone thinks that he is not behaving properly toward his fiancée, if his passions are strong, and so it has to be, let him marry as he wishes. It is no sin. Let them marry. But if someone stands firm in his resolve, being under no necessity, but having his own desire under control, and has determined in his own mind to keep her as his fiancée, he will do well. So then, he who marries his fiancée does well, and he who refrains from marriage will do better. A wife is bound as long as her husband lives, and if the husband dies, she is free to marry anyone she wishes, only in the Lord. But in my judgment, she is more blessed if she remains as she is, and I think that I too have the Spirit of God.
All right, thank you. This is sort of like a great deal of case law, if you think about it, and I mean, you can only imagine what the request that came to Paul probably was like. What are we supposed to do with all these different types of relationships? And so there's some central concepts that govern this. One, and we talked a little bit about this last week, is that Paul at this point in his life, and it doesn't change much, but there was a number of folks inside the early church that literally thought that the second coming was at hand. I mean, it was just a matter of time. You can think back to, I mean, there was a belief that even in the ascension, you remember in Acts, first couple of chapters of Acts, when Jesus ascends, what are people doing? Do you remember that story? Now, we haven't studied Acts, so I don't understand this is outside the... They're just looking up, like, when's he coming back? I mean, you know, so there is a level of expectation, maybe a level of praise, but, you know, and then you have two angels that come and say, all right, get about your business, go on, you know, leave, scat, get out, you know, and but Jesus ascends, and everybody's thinking, okay, this is, you know, the second coming is going to be coming here pretty soon, and so there was a thought inside the New Testament, at least the New Testament at this time, that the end was coming fairly soon. That it wasn't going to be, it maybe within their lifetime, that Christ would return, and that the kingdom, the culmination of the establishment of the kingdom, would take place. There definitely was not an understanding that it was going to be years and years in the future, and so in some of Paul's writings in this particular chapter, he writes with this understanding that the end's around the corner, and if that is the case, then just sit tight, and it's going to be okay. And so, does that make sense? I mean, I think last week what we said was that if you knew that somebody was going to pick you up for lunch when this study today is over with, you might not go and eat a ton of refreshments, right? Because your behavior is influenced by what will immediately happen. And so you've got some of this going on inside the text. And so you've got, what sounds like not double talk, but you've got some level of like, well, if you're single, stay single. But if you want to get married, be married. Single's good, marriage's good too. And I mean, so it's what is it? Should we be single? Should we get married? So and then we move into to the end part of this chapter, and you've got this idea that it says, what is it? when it says, 25, now concerning virgins, does any of your Bibles translate that into daughters? Now concerning daughters. There are some versions that do that. That's a minority view, and it's hard to justify it, but I think there are at least one or two versions of the Bible that talk about daughters instead of virgins. And so, but Paul's really not talking about daughters, because that's a separate word altogether in the Greek. And so, if he was talking about daughters, because there are other books that he writes and he uses the Greek word for daughters, then you could make the assumption that if he's very familiar with the Greek language, if he meant daughters, he would have said daughters. And so it's not so much daughters or unwed daughters. One possibility of what's going on in the text is this, and we don't know 100% what Paul is fully getting at, other than that we can make some conclusions by what was going on in the time of Paul's writing. There were people who were men and women would live together in the same house, and they would even share the same bed, but they would not have sexual relations, and they were very disciplined in their life in this area. They would engage in every aspect of life together, but just not sexual activity. And over time, in Corinth, in that culture, the woman would be referred to as the man's virgin. All right, so just kind of give you a little bit of context for... As the man's virgin. Virgin, excuse me. Not virgin. And so that did show up in the Greek culture, and so this could be one of the issues that are going on inside of Corinth. And so what Paul, if that is the case, Paul is stating that if you can maintain this type of disciplined lifestyle, then so be it. But if you can't, marry. I mean, it doesn't have to be harder than what it is. And that's probably the majority view of what we think Paul is addressing here. The minority view is that a man and a woman would have gone through the marriage ceremony. They would have done everything that people would do at that time to be married. They just would not have consummated the wedding. And yet they live without consummating the wedding because of this. And they believe that the end is near. And so they vowed to do everything as man and wife, or as husband and wife, but not sexual relationships in the marriage. And if that is the case, Paul's advice to them would be the same that he gave to the majority view, which is that if you can keep this type of vow, then that's fine. But if you can't, then live like a normal couple, for lack of better words. The key behind all of this is that Christianity is not to abolish ordinary normal life, but your ordinary normal life should glorify God. And everything that you do should bring glory to God, even the everyday part of your life. But don't make agony your religion. And the church is good at making agony your religion, or a religion. If you think back to when all throughout the history of the church, whenever, and you see this whenever there's major plagues or famines and things of that nature, people would do these agonizing forms of fasting as if to demonstrate their faith. Some of the early Celtic monks would wade out into freezing water up to neck deep and quote the Psalms every morning. I mean, as if to say, boy, I'm really spiritual because I can endure, freezing water for a long period of time. And a lot of them end up dying, and near the end of the first century, but definitely into the second 100s and in the early part of 200s of the church, what we call the pre-Nicene time of the church. Anytime there was persecution that would break out because of an emperor, there would be church people who would go and run down to the local magistrate, the local police department, and say, "I'm a Christian, I'm ready to die." And so what they would do is they'd load them up, throw them in a wagon, take them to Rome, and pitch them out in front of the lions. I mean, and so there were all these saints. Saint Ignatius was one of the big ones who wrote about this. He's writing to the same 7 churches that that John wrote to in Revelation. And he said, "I'm going to be coming your way because I know the way that we're going to Rome and we're going to be stopping. Now don't free me from this." And it's very gory. When the lions crush my bones and squirts the blood and you hear me in agony, I'm finally going to understand what it means to be crucified with Christ. And so there are other people who were, he was a bishop of Antioch, and Antioch would be in this area. And so he's arrested here, and he makes this long journey via caravan all the way up over here to Rome. And the whole way he's saying, they're going to be stopping in these cities, and they're Christians there. He said, don't free me now. I want this. As if to say, this is what real faith means. And so, fasting, what this does, this raises the issue of what really is fasting? What really is abstinence of something, to say no to something here so that you could say yes to something, to something over here. I mean, how are we to see that? Or is it just don't eat lunch, or maybe just drink water, and you ever during Lent there are people who do a 40-day fast. I don't know if y'all have ever tried doing that. I used to fast all the time. Not anymore. I like to eat now. But the whole concept of fasting, denying yourself. Even Jesus, when what does he say in the Gospels about if you are going to go through a time of agony, or abstinence, or fasting, or whatever? How do you present that to the people around you? Yeah, not woe is me. Yeah, but we like woe is me. I mean, does that make sense? I mean, I'm so spiritual, that how many minutes or hours do y'all pray a day? I pray a bunch, and I read the Bible all the time. How much do you read? So it's, you just got people, and it's not just something that was going on here or going on in the early church. Think back to, your understanding and your experience with the church. Have you not seen people make agony their religion? Right, and so it's almost like a badge of courage, that I can't go and do that. Thank you very much, but I'm holy, and so I'm going to be fasting that day, and you're a rat because you don't. But that's okay. I'll pray for you while I'm fasting. There are people who do that. Hypochondriac. Yeah. No. This is not. I don't know if I'd have to go do some word studies on that. If maybe there's some root, some of the same root words. No, I'm being sarcastic. No, this is people who, and think about the leaders of Corinth. Okay, think about how they are positioning themselves in the church. I have special knowledge, you don't, which makes me a better leader. Or because I'm holier than you, these are my terms, I'm not using Paul's terms, then I have special privileges that you don't. And so you have people who, who even inside this whole concept of marriage and relationships that would say, well, I'm holier than you because I'm more disciplined than you are. And you can't, but that's okay. I'm because I can remain in this form of life and you can't, then I'm better because my whole life is directed to God, and that's that's my only responsibility. You might have a little bit directed to God, but you got to care for your spouse and your children and stuff like that. So I'm up here, you're kind of down here. And so that's in a paraphrase. That's what's going on in the text, and it's, in this particular example, it has to do with your body and has to do with relationships inside of marriage. But the underlying theme is, what is it that affects us inside the church, where we this idea of where we want to make agony our religion, as if to prove that we are closer to God than the next, because it shows up today. Inside certain circles inside of the church, it's just not something that was going on in the first century or going on inside of Corinth, and which is interesting. The idea is everything. The whole birth of the monastic order that shows up in the 300s. Basically, what happens? Constantine blesses Christianity. 320, Christianity gets a pass. Or I think 312, they're approved religion. 320, they become the religion of the empire. And I think one of them is called the Edict of Milan. Don't hold me to that. I'll go back and research that. But as soon as that happens, there are a number of people that says, well, now the government's involved in religion. It's going downhill. And so they run out into the desert area as if to say, I'm going to rid myself of all this pollutants inside the city, and I'm going to go in the wilderness area and go through these just horrible, agonizing styles of life, because that's the only way that we can be pure. And that's some of the undercurrent of monasticism, and their whole orders that are founded off that. And people, they don't speak for years, or they only eat, a tiny morsel of bread. That's all they eat every day for the rest of their life, and so their body's wasting away. And but they equate that as, heightened spirituality. I mean, is that true? Well, I mean, that's the goal of fasting or of some level of abstinence is to, whatever my normal activity is, I'm going to forsake that for a period so that I can focus on God. But the idea is that I come back to it. Does that make sense? And there are some that takes the means to the end, and the means becomes the end, if that makes sense. And it's there. I mean, it can be ugly. I mean, for lack of better words. I mean, it's, when you, there's nothing worse than an arrogant Christian. I'm serious. I mean, this is and it plagues the church and all throughout our history. It shows up here. It shows up in us today. And, which is when we get into chapter 13. Well, I'll tell you what, turn to chapter 13. All right? 1 Corinthians 13, very famous chapter. Just look at verses 4 through 8a, which is the first part of chapter 8. It says, love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but it rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Then it says, love never ends. Well, that's the governing principle. All right, so if that's the governing principle, and you think about what would that be like if that was how we, every day we sought to live our life this way. That when people look at us, or when they, however our life and their life butts up next to each other, and we, in relationships or however the day unfolds, if we made our goal is that from someone else's experience of our life, this is what they perceive. Okay? Not envious, not boastful, not arrogant, not rude, believes all things, hopes all things. If people witness that, there would be no way that they could draw the conclusion of arrogance. And yet there are a number of us inside the church that we pride ourselves on like our agony, to use the concepts in the text, or on the idea that because we are a believer and that we trust in God, that somehow that gives us status that is higher than others. And the status that comes with being a Christian has to do with status with God, but not status with other people. When we talk about justification, salvation, believing, born again, there's a whole laundry list of words that we use to describe that. It has to do with you and God. It's not, you've reached some level of Christianity that others haven't reached, and because of that, now you are superior to them. If anything, even the whole concept of baptism, there's about 4 or 5 things that we believe about baptism, regardless of the denomination that you're a part of or that we're a part of, or what central component or even means or method of baptism. Baptism, you identify with the death of Christ, you identify with the resurrection of Christ, you are welcomed into the family of God or into the church, into the kingdom. But the other one is you're commissioned to be sent back out. And so the whole concept of someone coming into Christ, it's designed to come into Christ, but then to go out in service. And so as people are drawn to Christ, oops, that's not an arrow, that people are drawn to Christ from however that takes place, and there's transformation that takes place, Holy Spirit given, so you can put a lot of stuff's going on right here, but the idea is they are sent out in ministry as servants. And so the whole concept of humility, the whole concept of loving others, the whole concept of the life goal when sent out is to be a type of person that when other people see that, they are drawn back to, they end up doing this. All right? Well, where does arrogance fit into this? Never. And yet there are, we could probably spend the rest of our... Sure. And so, the whole way that Christianity, there's a reason why the Bible talks a great deal about what the goal of transformation is, for you to be like Christ. And it's not Christ as, the firstborn from the dead and the head of the church. And it's not that part of Colossians chapter 2. Okay? That's not what we're getting at. But the idea of being formed or transformed into the image of Christ is that you become suffering servant.
One thing that comes to my mind when you're talking about it, and I've been a part of this, so I'm not forgetting it. In its purest form, it's like the walk to a mess.
Sure, okay, yeah.
That ends up being, if you're not careful, it ends up being almost like a cult.
Right.
If you're not careful.
Right, absolutely. Are y'all familiar with Walk to Emmaus? Y'all know what that is? It's a renewal weekend that was started by the Upper Room. The same ministry that puts out the little devotional books, and it's a great renewal movement. It's fantastic. It's Wesleyan in its origin, and it's Wesleyan in its theology, and it's designed around a weekend experience that has 15 different talks. 5 of them are from clergy, 10 of them are from laity. And it's normally in a secluded place where you're able to just unplug from the world around you for about 3 days or so, 4 days, Thursday night to Sunday. And the idea is, if you can get away from the world around you for a bit, and you can be around people that are similar to you, at least when it comes to gender, it makes it easier, or at least it creates an environment to sort of have some self-reflection. And it's a very powerful renewal movement. And I'm a big fan of the Emmaus movement. I think it's fantastic for what it's done for the church. If you're in the Catholic Church, Cruceo, Tres Dias, things like that. Now the negative is that people the temptation is you can go through a renewal movement like this, and it becomes the badge you have. And well, I don't know if Ann's been to Emmaus or not, but Ann, if you haven't been to Emmaus, I have. So actually, if you would leave the room for just a second, because we're about to talk about only insider stuff, and so, hang on, fighting a cough. And, so there are people who do that even inside the church, but that's a great example of, of what it could be. You can do it inside your denominations. You can do it inside of your own local church. It's so easy to do this, and sometimes people don't. Unfortunately, people don't realize they're even being that way, and but it's one of the things that I hope that you constantly are aware of is what's your perception from the people around you. Now, you can't control it to some degree, okay? I mean, you could be Mother Teresa and someone else can still think you're a rat, all right? So, I mean, there's some limits to that. But the idea of going through the world around you with not even a concern about what your witness is, be careful. We are to some degree our brothers and our sisters' keeper. Okay, now you're not 100%. They have a level of freedom, and we're not trying to alter whether or not they have freedom. But the idea that says, I'm sorry, that's just your problem. I'm okay, and all of y'all are not, and that's just your problem because you're not. Be careful. The seat of authority then in that school of thought is not God. It's you or the person. And so it's something to, one of the things that we really haven't gotten into just yet, it comes up in chapter 8 and chapter 9, is you're going to find this phrase that shows up in the NRSV, all things are lawful, not all things are beneficial. All right? And because it's not beneficial, Paul says, lay it down. You understand what I mean by that? Does that make sense? Yeah, all things are lawful, which means you can do a ton of things and you still be holy or pure or, in a good relationship with God because it's not sinful. All right? But if it's not beneficial to the people around you, then you don't do it.
I have a little explanation, and it's always stuck with me. When we were still living in Florida, I worked for a person that was very popular in the little city of Destin. She owned a very upscale interior design shop.
Mm-hmm.
She was a Christian and very
Right.
open, but she had gone to lunch with a client one day, and they had wine.
Mm-hmm.
And when she came back, she told me she felt real bad about having done that in the restaurant. Why did she feel bad? And I said, because knowing that everybody knows you, you're afraid somebody saw you maybe.
Right. Right.
That it would be harmful to them.
Sure.
But though it wasn't harmful to her.
Right.
So to me, that's always been my way of looking at that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously things like alcohol and some other things like that is where, I don't want to use the word battleground because that has such a negative, but that's the field by which some of this stuff is played out. And, but there's a number of other things. I mean, what would there really are a ton of things that are lawful. And what do I mean by lawful? It's you're not breaking the law with God, and but there needs to be at least just a thought that says even though it's lawful, which means I can do it and it be okay, but if it is going to hurt somebody, then I probably don't need to. Does that make sense? I mean, they're going to be now. A lot of this depends on circumstance. Okay, and in chapter 8, it's what do you do when you are invited to, say in Corinth, say if there was a friend that was not a Christian, and their son is graduating from high school, so to speak, and they're going to have a big to-do, and they go down to the local, Baal and they make an offering of meat because they want to honor their son, and they want their blessings upon their son. And so the way they would do it is that they would take a third of the meat, give it to the priest of whatever temple it is. They'd take a third of it and burn it up on the altar as a sacrifice to God, because it's no different than what they did in the Old Testament with Judaism. And then a third of it you would be able to take home. Now you could sell it at the market, or you could take it home and eat it. And often what was going on is they would take it home, invite their friends over, and they would eat the meat that was offered to an idol. And so one of the things that comes up is, well, should a Christian, in Corinth partake of this? And what Paul basically says, it's all right. I mean, what's it to, if the food, taking in the food's not going to do anything to you, but if he actually says somebody of a weaker conscience, if this is going to bother them, then abstain from it. But, have at it if not, type experience. And so, but the idea is, is it lawful for you to go and eat? Yeah. Is it beneficial? Well, we don't know. But you got to pay attention to what's going on around you, and that shouldn't be something that's totally out of kilter for us, because we do that already. I mean, do you always act do you act the same way amongst your adult friends as you do with your grandchildren? I mean, maybe, but sometimes there's some things you probably don't do in front of them, right? I mean, because they're not mature enough yet. I mean, they don't understand what's going on. And so, do you watch the same TV shows in front of them? Why not? Yeah, so I mean, yeah, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse and whatever else. I'm so glad we're over that in our household. But I mean, that's just an example of it. I mean, so this is not something it's the first time it might be the first time we've really studied it, but it's not something that would be a first practice for us, because I mean there are times that we already do that, and but the idea is, I mean, as if our goal in life is to present our bodies as a living sacrifice, which is our reasonable service or worship, according to Paul, and that the purpose of that is, one, the living out of our faith, the maturation of our faith, and the idea that what's hot-wired into all this is that our life is the witness. Then what we do, we have to pay attention to the people around us, and what aspect of witness are we giving? Is it one that is beneficial to building up the kingdom? Is it one that's not? And sometimes there are actions that we do where people cannot see any difference between us and the world around us, where they wouldn't know that faith is even a matter or even an influence in our life. And there are times where I'm going to say this just because I don't have a better way of saying it, that we highlight that it's such an influence in our life and they're not there, and in doing that, they'll never be there. Is that, which is arrogance. So, you have to pay attention to the world around you, and it's not, and it is to some degree tied to circumstance. And, depending on who's around you and what's going on and what's taking place. All right? Any comments or questions?
I would say,
Yeah, sure.
this is like a Paul question.
Right.
My ex-wife's uncle, named Jim, boyfriend, he went off to he was in love with a woman.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't pan out. His brother got her. So he marched off to the monastery, and he spent 30 months there, not saying one word. Long
Mm-hmm.
time,
Sure.
making wine and making cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Well, during that time, Oscar, the oldest brother, he got cancer and was in the process of dying. That's why he came back. He died.
Right.
Well, and not long after, Oscar married Jim.
Right.
They had 2 children, and now they were going to have
Right.
I know them all. And they always lived in kind of a place, the children that were born after Paul and John.
Right.
Were, you know, who is what? You know, what relation are we? You know, and it was a very, it's true, you know, the whole thing happened just like that. And, or at least, you know, I was friends with the I don't know if they're first cousins or brothers.
Right.
It was really unusual. John used to be the only one that I knew that would talk about it.
Right.
This is odd, because, you know, because they had to put it together as they grew up.
Right.
So, but anyway, what would Paul say about that? Would he say, well, hey, you did the right thing, it was fine, you know?
Well, you know, there was the thought that said if one brother died, then it was the job of the other brother to marry, you know, to continue on the line. Maybe that's what they were doing. You know, there's a lot into the circumstance of, you know, what was going on and why she ended up with one and you know what. So it'd be kind of hard to figure out exactly what Paul would say. Yeah, you know.
They were raised, Swedish people raised Catholic, and very religious in a strict sense.
Right.
So, that, like I know this probably didn't go on, but I used to think that the cellist, the one that you can crank the thing down and get the punishment for, you know,
Yes.
the wrath they have, I used to wonder if that went on too, you know.
Well, and there could be. I mean, you know, there's there were people going around in the times of the Black Plague, and they were whipping themselves. And the idea was that the more I whip myself in the form of penance, then God is going to take the plague away. Well, the more they whipped themselves, the more wounds they created, which means the more susceptible they were to disease. Guess what? They all died. You know, and so then that just compounded. You know, God's really mad at us now. You know, and He's killing all the holy folks. You know, all of us need to whip ourselves. You know, so you know, there's got to be careful with some of that. And particularly when your agony becomes your religion. That's something that can be where something that originally was designed to maybe be a period of time, a means for something greater, but the means becomes the most important thing, and it's putting the cart before the horse. And it can be an idol, and it can be ugly.
Sort of like the born again years, where everybody that was born again criticized those who
Well,
go through it.
right. Well, I mean, that did happen. I mean, you have some whole stigma around the whole, especially in the South, evangelical theology around, you know, what's born again and what's not. One of the things that developed was, you know, people looking behind the tree. You know, are they born again? Are you born? You know, and if you didn't have the right language, you know, and I'll never forget someone telling me one time. I was in my just right out of seminary, and someone said, "Well, I'm a Spirit-filled Christian," and I said, "Hey, aren't we all? You know, I mean, that's what it means to be a Christian. Spirit lives inside of me." And they said, "No. I'm Spirit-filled." And I said, "All right, we all are, according to Acts." I mean, you know, but I mean, it was the idea of, you know, there's something better in this, you know, than do you have it, you know, and so you have to be careful with that. And, you know, it is required of all for maturation of faith, all growth, growing in grace. But what the witness that you present to the world, the temptation that I think is greater for the Christian is to become arrogant. And not so much that, at least in certain pockets of our country. And you know, I would just, you know, caution us that if humility is an issue, then it's an issue.
It's like actions speak louder than words.
Right. You know, and well, I mean, and Betty, you're right. If you really want to, and we're going to break in just a second. If you want to get a good, you know, if you just want to get your hands around this, pay attention to the words you use, and pay attention to what you do. And you know, I'll never forget having to write down when my son struggled when he was a little boy with stuttering. We had to write down everything that was going on in our life. I mean, everything, every event, how long, you know, in a day, and we had to do that for about a month, you know, and because the speech pathologist said, "I think your life is too busy for your son," and at this age, you know, trying to grasp it at his, you know, 2-3 years old, he can't. And so his mind is, you know, moving faster than his his motor skills will let him. And I thought, this lady's an idiot. I mean, I didn't say that. I told y'all, I didn't say it to her. And I thought, too busy, you know. And so then I started writing down all my stuff, and I thought, oh my gosh, she's right. I'm the idiot, you know. And so we, you know, we put our life down on lockdown. And so whenever we start to see the same thing start to manifest itself again, you'll see me start bowing out of a lot of engagements to get it back on cue. Now, I wish I would say I'm smart enough to keep it managed like that all the time. You know, I fight that demon. But, you know, it's important for us to keep stability. And I don't know where that came from, so we need to take a break. You know, I'm sure that was going to be some wonderful words that was going to make the clouds part, and we were all going to get it, you know. But so anyway, let's take a break. It's past our time. Let's take a break for about 10, 15 minutes. Okay, let's go ahead and come back to order. Okay. How many extra prayer copy sheets? So we need about 10 maybe? So maybe about 7 more probably. Okay, Ann is going to be making some copies of the prayer request sheet. I know we need just a handful more. And so if you haven't, when she comes back in, if you have not received a copy, if you would just let her know. And then I've got, I think everybody has chapter 8, the slides on chapter 8. We do not? All right, here we go. We got some back up here. All right. Thank you. All right. Chapter 8. All right. Just one page, front and back. It's a real small chapter. There's only a handful of verses, 13 verses in it. And we're going to wait on Ann to come back. Just to, as a reminder, some of you are familiar or friends with the Royer family. Hugh Jr. service is today at 1. I think Ann's service here was about 9 or 10 years ago. And is it Carol? Is that it? What was the mother's name? The wife's name? Carol? Okay, Carol. About 9 or 10 years ago, St. Paul hosted that. I think they were a part of St. Paul years ago. Right, for a long time, and then so I think there's just a small connection with St. Paul, and we're glad to host it to help in any way that we can. And but I know a number of you. I think they grew up. I think little Hugh grew up at off Wildwood. I don't know if that's true or not. Right, and so at some point in Midtown. And now the third's been playing golf and traveling for a long time. I think he's in South Carolina now. All right, so any questions about chapter 7 before we move into chapter 8? Okay, so we're going to get into chapter 8, and it's around that same concept of, again, in the larger context of physical body, spiritual body, how they're connected together, how does physical and metaphysical exist together inside of Christian thought. And you're going to see how, again, Paul, that same thought that you can't separate the two, that they are connected, doesn't go away, and it is part of the thought or the influence inside of Paul's writing. So we're going to look at chapter 8. If somebody would be willing to read 8, it's only 13 verses. Any volunteers? Okay, Susan's going to read chapter 8 for us.
Now about food sacrificed to idols. We know that we all possess knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love fills up. The man who thinks he knows something does not yet know as he ought to know. But the man who loves God is known by God. So then, about eating food sacrificed to idols, we know that an idol is nothing at all in the world, and that there is no God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things come to being, and for whom we live. stumbling block to the weak. For if anyone with a weak conscience sees you who have this knowledge eating in an idol's temple, won't he be emboldened to eat what has been sacrificed to idols? So this weak brother for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. When you sin against your brother this way, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if what I eat causes my brother to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause him to fall.
Okay. Thank you. So this is, continues that thought that we ended with before the break. Go back to when we talked about Corinth as a whole. In pretty much every Greek city, there was just a host of different temples. Now, one major temple over that might be the central god or goddess for that particular city, but they had temples everywhere, and gods of for this and God for that, and so it was very common in that day for people to this whole religious world of going and offering food, and that was very common. It showed up. Greeks had a god for everything, and so Corinth would be no different. And so, if you were walking down the street in Corinth, I mean, you would literally see all these different places that you could go that would maybe be dedicated to this god or goddess, and on down the road, and you could go and pay homage or worship, or at least go make a sacrifice to them. And we talked about what they normally did with the meat. A third is how it was processed. And even in the Old Testament, that's what took place. A third went to God, or certain parts of it. A third went to the priest and their family. And then a third went that the person or the family making the sacrifice retained that, and then they could go and do whatever they want with it. Most of the time they would go home and use it in some level in a celebratory type manner. So what you have is, what do you do when you're invited to something that is outside of the church or outside of your faith, but yet it involves some form of religion? In this case, a whole concept of an idol. And do you eat it? Do you not eat it? There's also some interplay in the text about are idols real? I mean, what are they? Right. I mean, but that's. Did y'all ever in the Eastern Church? What's always been a part of the Eastern Church is icons. I don't mean icons like on your phone, that say, calendar and whatever, but a little statue of Jesus, or a little statue of a saint or Mary or whatever, and they're used in worship. And many of the most holy, many of the holy places in the early church were either graves of saints, or were something that a saint, if there's something that a saint did that was, fairly significant, that would be something that would be marked. And often the bones of saints were kept. If you had a lock of hair from, how many of you would want to have a lock of hair from Elvis? You got a couple, got some honest people here, or some clothing, maybe that white, Vegas jumpsuit, she has what? Oh, really? Oh, wow. So we actually have some of this. Okay. Hey, unbeknownst to y'all, that was part of the lesson. In 1 Corinthians chapter 14, and Elvis shall no. But but in the early church, that was fairly common, and holy sites were considered holy. One, if something important took place there, or if it was a shrine that held something physical from, a heavyweight person, either maybe a disciple or maybe a a descendant of a disciple or a disciple of a disciple. And so icons have long been a part of the church. Now in the Protestant Reformation, 1500s, now for the first 1500 parts of the church, icons are used, which meant, if this was, 1450 and St. Paul's in existence and we're worshiping, there would be icons in St. Paul. And, we have stained glass windows. Maybe at the base of the stained glass window there might be, some wooden figure or some porcelain or something that would be, a picture of Jesus or what have you. And people would often go and pray beside the icon. And it was used in devotional practices. And now one of the things that comes out of the Protestant Reformation is that icons, this is where some of the, the baby goes out with the bathwater in the whole breaking in the church between in the Protestant Reformation. This, Protestants saw this as, well, this can be polluted. This can be, we can use this in a way to guilt people. We can manipulate people through icons, and after all, with the idea of Scripture becoming a huge importance and authority that showed up from the Protestant Reformation, we don't need icons anymore, and so. But for the first 1500 years of the church, icons were very much a part of it, and they weren't considered idols. And they were considered something that would be very helpful in devotional practices. How might an icon, if we were to just kind of brainstorm for a second, how might an icon be helpful in a devotional practice? Pardon me? Yeah, it helps you focus, or centering,
Now, when you go to the Eastern churches, it can be a little unnerving, especially if your guide kneels for an icon.
Right. And so, right. Because you were taught that, are you paying homage to the icon and not homage to God? But in the early church, that was not, there wouldn't have been a problem with that. They wouldn't have associated, if this was the chapel of St. John and there was an icon of St. John, going and kneeling before the icon would have been perceived as just devotion to God. And, the Protestant Reformation, one of the things that shows up among Protestants is, this is a no-no. And because of, they might be, the icon is the end and not the means to an end.
It was your whole idea of things swinging.
Right, yeah.
When the Renaissance came and the basis of all the art of the early Renaissance
Right.
would have been religious.
That's right.
And I'm using that term broadly. But then
Well, the paintings, all that stuff, yeah. Right.
There was a rebellion against that.
Right, and that shows up in societies, and not just in Christian society, but in societies in general. And so both of those are excellent points. But it shows you that physical things have always been used to help in devotional practices. For instance, if you were to go and sit in our sanctuary, or any church's sanctuary for the most part in Columbus, there might be some that don't have stained glass windows, but not many. Or if you were to go and sit in our chapel, on a nice, beautiful, sunny day, and just sit and allow yourself to be still for a moment or two, would you not be drawn to the stained glass windows? All right? And the color, the image, things of that nature are not to be where you would go and worship the window or even worship the image in the window, but they would be used in a way to help in your devotional practices to God. So it was no different inside the church with certain things that were physical than what was going on outside the church and other types of in temple worship and pagan worships and things of that nature. They had physical items that stood for something, or at least it was supposed to stand for something. And what Paul is getting at is, is this really real? Or is it just made up of wood or gold or silver or what? I mean, when you hold the icon, I mean, if this is, how many of you hold a cross from time to time, or have a cross that you might hold when you pray or whatever? It's not the cross that Jesus died on. So I mean, there's not. I mean, it's not the same wood. It's not like it was carved out of that cross. And why even hold it? It's just something. It's metal, or porcelain, or wood, or whatever. It's just made out of something physical.
I just hate to see the icons if you go to an antique shop or somewhere and they're on the shelves. I feel like I need to buy them all.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, because now you assign some value to them, right? That they're holy, or they're important, that they aid in spiritual development. Right. Right. But she is in yes, exactly right. You're the one that is saying this is a value, because somebody else could walk in and say, "Oh, that's nice, but I really don't like it. I'm going to buy the Monopoly game or something," And so, but I mean, but for you, it's important and it's meaningful and things of that nature. But it's just made out of something that's tangible. Same thing here. And so what Paul is getting at in the text is that the idol itself, on one level, is just something that was carved or fashioned or what have you. That it's nothing more than something that is just tangible. Correct? That's one thing that we get out of this text. The other thing is that he talks about is that if there is only one God, commandment number 1, then are there really any other gods? Right. And so there's a theological principle behind this that there's no God. This, even though this is physical and it's just wood or gold or silver or metal or whatever it would be, it really, it doesn't stand for anything. And because there's no God, it's not a representation of a God, because there's just one God, as Paul points out in the text. So if those two things are true, and you find yourself at a barbecue, and they have taken meat and cooked it at the altar in this place, is there really anything to the meat other than the fact that it's just meat? So you can eat it, right? What's that?
You bring what's inside.
Sure. So you can eat it, right? It's no big deal. Correct?
I probably could.
You probably could. Okay, well, hang on now. We got some people shaking their heads. Yeah, I can eat it. Some people saying I can't. So why? What's the difference? We got some people saying, yes, it's good barbecue. Other people are saying, no, I don't like it. And right. So yeah. So right. What you're introducing now, Becky, is that is there something that we bring into this that changes it for us? That's not going to change the fact that it's still ribs or whatever. I mean, whatever part of the barbecue that you're eating. It doesn't change. It's not like the meat. You say a prayer over it and the meat becomes the idol or something. It's still just meat. All right. And but. No, that has more to do with, that's something completely different. Because this is more pagan culture than anything else. And the idea, and you can take out meat. Let's just say he uses meat. It could be grain offerings. There are a whole host of different types of offerings, normally depending upon what you wanted in the outcome or what you did leading up to the sacrifice, determine what prescription you followed bringing to the altar. For instance, well, some of that, if you couldn't afford much, it was, maybe a bird, a dove shoot. You kill a dove, boom, got it. All right, or maybe a grain offering. Take some grain offering. Leviticus 2:2. Take a little grain, throw some oil on it, throw it on the fire, it's an offering. And so a lot of it just depends on what you did, what you got. Now some of it would be, there would be a prescription. If you did X, which was bad, it required something a little bit more than a grain offering. There might be a bull or a goat or what have you. But whatever it is here, some level of food, let's just say that, all right? There's something food that's, it's only food. It'll always just be food. It's not going to change. The molecules aren't going to turn into something else. It's just going to be food. And what we've discovered, at least where we're at right now, is, yeah, we can eat it, and no, we can't. And so what's the difference?
How you feel personally.
Right. So that's exactly right. What do you bring into this? And the way Paul describes this is that because the idol's nothing more than it's just something tangible. It's no God behind it. There's only one, there's only one God. This is nothing more than just something that's tangible. This is nothing more than food, unless that you bring something to the food. Now notice that he doesn't say in the text, one is holier than the next, or one is better than the other, or if you eat it or if you don't eat it, you're closer to God. There's none of that that's in the text at all. See, and sometimes we make mistakes there. He just says some people can eat it and it's lawful. Some people can't and it's lawful. And the issue is, what do you bring to it?
But there is that scripture that says something, don't eat something that will offend somebody else.
Well, it's right in here. I mean, that's what we find. It's in, help me out if you find it before me. Verse 13, therefore if food is a cause of their falling, I will never eat meat so that I may not cause one of them to fall. And so, but now we haven't got to that yet, but that's a separate issue in and of itself. We're just dealing with us first. Should we eat the meat? Should we not eat the meat? And the issue is, you can eat it or you cannot eat it, and you're still going to be just as close to God. You're still being just as faithful, as you can be. The issue is what you bring to it, right? But then there's, as Joanne has pointed out, there's something else. What about other people at the party? So you got others over here. And if it's okay for me to eat, let's just say I'm over here and I like barbecue, and I know that an idol is nothing more than just something that's tangible, and there's no God behind it, and I'm really hungry and I'm ready to go, and it's no big deal. But there's somebody that I know that what they bring to this is that they cannot eat it. Then what do? I don't eat it. That's exactly right. It's lawful, but it's not beneficial. And so when it's not beneficial, now I'm going to say it this way. All right, I'm just going to say it. Do not assign status to this, okay? Whatever is the lowest common denominator, or whatever is the common denominator, here, that's what we all play towards. Does that make sense? All right? Don't read one's higher. I don't. Some of you got a better vocabulary than I do. Come up with something better, I'll use that. All right? But the idea is, if there are 15 people that say I can eat it, and then there's one person that says I can't eat it, and there's 16 Christians at the table, what do the 15 do? They don't eat it. So that's what I mean by, when I mean lowest, I don't mean that one's better or worse. What I mean is that you have to pay attention to the people around you. Somebody said something? Yes. Yeah, exactly right. Respect for the conscience of the people around you. Respect for their faith. Respect for their growth, their maturation of faith, things of that nature. All that. Yes, ma'am.
Why does what this person wants
Dictate for the whole?
for the whole?
Because, now, what he talks about in the text is because it's better for one person not to fall than it is for the others to just maintain lawfulness. That's the reason why. Now, well, he uses the word weak conscience. I don't want to get into. I'm not sure we would say weak. I mean, in a sense of that, they're not strong. Does that make sense? I don't want us to move in that direction. Yeah. Well, again, that still is using weak in the same context, which is that. So I want to come up with a better word other than weak. All right. Well,
Still influenced by their culture?
well, hang on. Let me just think on that for a second. I mean, Paul used the word weak. The idea is what you don't want to do is you don't want to do things that cause other people to stumble. Now that's the key. All right. So it's more than just whether or not if we're all sitting at a table and Shane can't eat and everybody else can't eat and I say, hey, it's no big deal. I'm just not going to eat of this. Y'all go ahead and do that. That's different. But if it's something to where if I witness somebody eating and it blows up my whole faith concept and how that works, that's what he's getting at. So there's a lot of gray that we can't fully define. He doesn't give us a list of 10 things that define what it means to fall. So we don't know what that means. But he doesn't use that often. And so what the conclusions that I draw from this is that if there's something that I do that is going to hurt people and their walk with Christ, I need to just pay attention to it. Now it could be that what's required is conversation. Maybe they have maybe there's some theological issues involved that maybe that they're processing through. Maybe there's some things I need to process through. But the key is not just I'm gonna make them mad but it's what if I do something that's really gonna hurt them or hurt my ability of influence with them, then I need to pay attention to it. Right. Sure. Well, let me give you a good example. When I was in seminary, in seminary, I went to a seminary that you had to sign an ethos statement, which means that you would not do certain things while you went to this school and while you were on school property. And if you lived in their dorms and whatnot, I mean, you signed it, and the idea, and there was a long list of things that showed up in the ethos statement. Well, there was a student one time, and the college, Asbury College and Asbury Seminary, are just separated by one road. And the seminary's on one side, college on the other side. Well, the president of the college, when I was at the seminary, very prominent man, very big in Methodism, and really a fantastic guy. And he retired about the year I graduated from seminary. But a student one time saw him walking into the liquor store, which was a breaking of the ethos statement. And immediately the student was just ready, I can't believe this guy did this or whatever. And he didn't even bother to go talk to the president. What the president was doing was that his grandson was sick. And what his doctor told him to do was you need to go and buy this specific thing. They sell it at this store. And so, so the issue came up with, I can't believe he did that because, it's a violation and you're causing people to stumble and woe is this guy who's got so much responsibility and so much influence over other people. And so, the reason why I said there's some gray in this is because what might be needed is just some level of conversation between the two, if that makes sense. And say what now? Right, and well, it's more than just that. I mean, it's the idea of, well, it does look bad. Okay, I mean, you can't hide that. Well, for instance, I mean, let's talk about that for a second and how we process that in our culture. I mean, sometimes we have these slogans and things that we abide by, and they're good and they're very prominent in our faith. But I mean, most of the time, it's only half of the story, and until and sometimes that operates out of our own anxiety, and so but without. How many times have you witnessed something and you didn't have the full story and you made a premature judgment? and it was wrong. Many times. Which means if you operate and act out of that premature judgment, what normally happens? It's worse. It blows up, which at some point means that you have to go and do what? Apologize. Because why? Because I've made some judgments that were incorrect. And so, the only thing I'm adding to this is that because, we don't know what it really means for someone to fall. That would, in my mind, it would be to lose faith or to really struggle with their whole belief system with God and things of that nature. It's hard to quantify that. Don't know. But I would hope that at least there's conversations that can either be explained or maybe where there's some level of communication that can take place so that both parties can grow. What we don't want to do is just get into situations where it's just hard and fast answers just like that, and it doesn't matter what happens. Most of the time, that can be destructive. Does that make sense? I mean, you might have some governing theological principles that influence you in how you operate and how you act, and hopefully influence you in your whole thought processes and things of that nature. But when there's separation of distance, where you only can get a certain point of what is either presented inside of the particular circumstance. If there's just some things that you don't know, then, my advice is to go and find out as much as you can know, which means conversations. If somebody does something that hurts you, there probably is a reason why they did that. Like in this case, if I don't want to eat the meat and everybody's eating the meat and I'm struggling, then, I would hope that I would have the courage to go and find out, why are y'all eating it? Why are you not abstaining from this? Well, because, this could be, it could be what Paul's talking about here in Corinth. It could be about something else. Does that make sense? I mean, because if you are, going back to what we talked about before the break, if you are living with the sense of humility and you are trying to be loving and arrogance is not the number one characteristic that comes out of your life, keep in mind, what's it say at the very beginning? Now concerning food sacrificed to idols, we know that all of us possess knowledge, but there's some who say we've got some special knowledge. Paul, be careful, knowledge puffs up. Love is the one that builds up. So those are some governing principles that take place inside of all of this. So if I am loving, and if I'm not puffed up, and if I'm trying to live out 1 Corinthians 13, then it would be easy for me to have the conversations here. Knowledge that puffs up is I make quick judgments and boom, that's it. Well, I think it's, truthfully, I think we struggle with managing our own anxiety. I mean, you see something and it strikes a chord. And remember, why is your best question to ask of yourself the worst question to ask of somebody else? All right? So, say if we leave here and somebody says something and immediately that just sets me off. Well, maybe there's some stuff I got to pay attention to inside of me for why it set me off in the first place. Now, it could be legitimate. But if I don't know why it pushes my buttons or why it sets me off where I go 0 to 100 just like this, which is not the normal behavior, then that's telling a great deal about what's going on inside of me. Does that make sense? And so, reflective prayer, I'm convinced, is the best discipline we have. And reflective prayer is not praying about, God, I want you to fix all these people and heal all these and take care of the world and stuff. It has nothing to do with that. It doesn't mean those aren't important, because we do pray for that. And that's a part of how we should pray. Reflective prayer is, all right, God, I'm going to pack my lunch today and I'm going to delve into the dark side of my life, and I want you to go with me. And I want to try to figure out, with your help, the guidance of your Spirit, why I respond the way that I do to certain things. Reveal to me those areas that are still in process of being healed and whole. That's almost a good time to end on that. It worked out perfectly, didn't it? Because what that does is that normally tells you where your fears lie. That normally tells you what will be the number, the number ones in your life that causes you anxiety. And it is the way I have a friend. She's a counselor. She has this picture of an iceberg. All right, you know how icebergs look. A little bit above the water, a lot under the water. And she said, we use about 10% of our brain, right? And this is what we know. 90% is what we don't know. Most of the time, the 90%, if we get in trouble when the 90% is the one that's influencing us and we don't know where it's coming from. All right, the key is for you to operate not so much out of this 90% that's unknown, that we're scared to look at and deal with, but to at least know this as much as possible and know which one is driving the boat. It's going to stem around, the pains of your life. What has been most hurtful for you throughout your life? Start there. And there's reasons why they were hurtful. What were they? And then spend some time around that. And it doesn't mean that the hurt goes away as if you forget that. But it just means that you are aware that that's a heightened area. And so if something happens that is similar to that experience, you're more inclined to operate out of that than you would something else. For instance, you ever been with someone and they come home and, as soon as they get home, man, it's World War III. And all you said was, hello. All right, guess what? This is what's driving the boat for them. Or for you, if you're the one that's doing that. And sometimes it's, and unfortunately we take it out on the people we love the most. That's easy. They're low-hanging fruit. They are. And, the dog's low-hanging fruit. It is. I forgot what I did, and we're going to stop at this. I wasn't feeling well, and this was like a couple of days ago. And, Connor said something, then Brooke said something, and before I realized it, I said, I'm not talking to y'all, shut up, and I thought, where did that come from, and so I, normally what happens, I felt bad, and I went in my room for a little bit, and all right, God, what happened here? I just went off the handle here, and all right, I'm sorry, go back and probably make amends, and but we all got it. The key is, if you don't know at least what's under the water, that's dangerous for your relationships. I'll tell you up front. It doesn't mean it's going to be, it doesn't mean you can't have relationships, but there will be issues that manifest itself from this. And it's going to manifest itself not with people you don't know or not who are your acquaintances. It's going to manifest itself with your core family. All right? And so, ask why. And whenever you've blown it, that's the best time to ask it. Why did I do that, God? Well, I was angry. Well, why was I angry? Well, because they said this. Well, why did that bother me so much? Well, because it makes me feel this way. Or it reminds me of this experience. Well, bingo. You've just now put your finger on what the real issue is. All right? Go in peace. May the Lord bless you.
Thank you for the cross. Thank you for